unfunded budget actually anticipated
language skills and
Place where it's kind of and she had that book.
The school, with its facilities usage committee, had been looking at that issue for months, and when I and the other two council members were elected, it sort of hit front and center, something that we needed to take up right away because it obviously directly impacted and dramatically impacted our districts and our city. So first thing, come November, we looked at the proposed or the considered options and began to roll up our sleeves. The city and the city staff had already done a lot of work in terms of researching that, getting their arms around it, and so we kind of picked up from there. I'm going from memory, but I think there are 200 or 300, somewhere around there, students who are going from Russell. And what will happen is Russell will close, and those students will be moved in a block up to Arvada Middle School. Meanwhile, Arvada Middle School will be converted to a K-8 program, a program where instead of having just 2 grades, 7th and 8th, you'll have the range of students from kindergarten through 8th grade. And then those students then would move on to high school. So it's evidently a model that is gaining favor here in the district anyway, and certainly it's familiar from years past and in private school mode as well. It seems to be something that is more successful. It seems to address the needs of the kids in those age ranges and those grades better. Well, looking at it, first of all, from the kids' standpoint, if you close an elementary school, you're closing that school. And in Russell's case, it's a school that's within walking distance of the alternative, which in this case now is Arvada Middle School. Just think about closing a middle school. You take every student who comes from 5 different elementary schools: Foster, Russell, Lawrence, Peck, Fitzmaurice. All those kids now have to be transported, because they're not within walking range, to North Arvada. And this is an age group that is especially vulnerable. This is when you want them engaged in school activities, and now all of a sudden they can't walk there on their own. So that most of all was the issue. The fact that we could keep them together, and they would be within, many of them, walking distance of Arvada Middle, that weighed heavily. And then from the city standpoint, Arvada Middle is in an area that's undergoing significant change. I mean, we've got the Gold Line coming on board in 2016. We are already in the neighborhoods surrounding Old Town and by the old Arvada Plaza. Those neighborhoods are turning around. They're good starter homes. We see lots of families, kids in strollers. And the fact that we see this change is corroborated by what's happening at Lawrence Elementary. In fact, the whole 4th grade is in trailers there. So we thought, you know, just beyond the time frame of the school district's study, we're seeing a big change that will cause a surge in enrollment at Arvada Middle. So we thought it was a key facility. It was going to be needed in just a few years. It would be much easier, much better to keep that facility in place rather than to try to replace it some years down the road. You know, I think it's over $1 million. However, there was $1 million left in from the bond issue that the district last passed a few years ago, earmarked for Arvada Middle School. So we're hoping that that money can be brought to the table to make that more economical. The other cities were involved and very much active on the issue. So far as I know, we were the only ones that came forward and said, here's an alternative. And truthfully, it was one that had already sort of percolated up. We'd heard about it, I think, coming at it from a different angle. Some of the principals had sort of a light on that. One of the other council member who was working on this directly, Rachel Zenzinger, is a teacher, so she has some familiarity with these models, the K-8 model, for example, and was really engaged herself. So all those things came together, I think, to tell us that maybe it's better to be realistic, help the district address the concern of needing to downsize, cut some of the capacity, which is excess, but at the same time address the needs of the kids and the community. And so we were seeking that win-win. Yes, I think we were the only ones that came forward and actually said, okay, if we're going to close, let's do this one right here. And that was a difficult thing for city to do. Sometimes people accuse the policymakers of already having their minds made up, and that clearly wasn't the case now, because we came forward with some ideas. The school district listened. In fact, we were in some ways just getting behind an idea that was sort of being massaged in the district, and there was a lot of give and take. Both the principals, the school board members that we had talked to, and the superintendent, all listening with open minds. So that's one example of how you partner in just solving problems. There are other more tangible instances. For example, Arvada maintains parks that are part and parcel of the playgrounds at many of the schools, 19 I think. So those students can play in the park adjacent, and the city maintains it. So you in effect have a playground that includes that open area. We also have school resource officers in every high school and junior high in the district. And those police officers have a real positive effect on the kids and are there as resources for them. You know, I understand that by keeping kids together in more of a primary school mode for a longer period of time, it helps to get kids over the hurdle of that early adolescence period, which is so tough. So you do better to ask a professional, but that's sort of my take on the thing. Plus, it's a model that is used currently in, say, private schools and in some school districts that evidently has led to good results. And the district as a whole, some of the school board members said, yeah, I'm really all for that. So just seems to be an idea that's coming back into its own. It was about $600,000 after the costs. However, one thing that wasn't incorporated into that number was the value of the school property. That property is at our fringe. It's adjacent to Costco along 52nd near Wadsworth and I-70. So it's in a location that probably among all the school district parcels is most saleable. And you know, was less and less suitable probably as an elementary school site. So if you factor in that, we had opinions of value that range in the low millions. So that really does add to the attractiveness of closing that location versus some of the other ones. You know, they've already gotten underway. Here we are, it's spring of 2010. The students down at Russell will finish their term, and then next fall of 2010 they'll start up at Arvada Middle School as a new K-8 program. So they're not wasting any time. Just to congratulate everybody who was involved. It's very difficult. I wouldn't like to be in the school board's shoes at this point. But the fact that they were willing to listen to the communities and make changes and work with us side by side. Councilmember Zenzinger has suggested that perhaps Arvada can continue to work without stepping on their toes, but can continue to work hand in hand on this issue going forward with the school district. I think that's very positive. So the idea would be to continue to be engaged, look to jointly problem solve, consider where there are the win-win possibilities, and then help the district in that way.